Budgets are complicated documents. Often tables of contents run for 20 pages or more in a document that is many hundreds of pages, but they generally have some unifying themes, and this budget is no exception. The unifying themes are tax cuts on the one hand and banking some of the gains that we've seen, the surprising gains in revenue collection this year. The tax cuts clearly have been the big part of the press story in the lead up to this budget, and the numbers themselves haven't disappointed. They're worth around $13 billion over the 4 years of the forward estimates, and that comes in two chunks, not passing through some changes in the Medicare levy and cutting some personal income tax rates for lower and middle income earners. As well, though, the government has put through or allowed some of the gains in revenue we've seen to flow through to the next couple of years. So the underlying cash balance, which is the measure most people still look at, is about $17 billion better off over the 4 years starting from this year going forwards over the next 3 years. So in that sense, the balance is not a bad outcome. Given what we've seen tonight, how do we assess the budget? Look, ideally tax cuts should be affordable, efficient and effective, and certainly to the extent these income tax cuts are given to people and households which are likely to spend them, you'd argue from an economic perspective, if the government wanted some stimulus, it's going to get some. But there are these nagging structural issues which the budget doesn't really do anything to resolve. For instance, 4 out of 10 households in Australia, once you take account of benefits, pay no net income tax. This requirement for people to get some income tax relief because wage growth is low and the price of non-discretionary items like energy has been going up a lot. That tension is there, and this budget does nothing to resolve that. And that's something that will need to be looked at over time. And that probably brings us, I think, to the core of the sense of frustration that people are likely to have with this budget. And we have a bit of that with this budget. That despite allowing some of the improvement in the budget bottom line to flow through and giving some tax cuts, hard to argue with either of those, there doesn't seem really an underlying sense of a plan. Australia has an ageing demographic. Working age population as a share of the total has for the last few years been declining. That is likely to be something which is very long lasting, and we haven't seen certainly in most people's lifetimes. We know that household debt is an issue, is likely to be a constraint on the economy going forwards. We know that we're in the midst of a technology shock, which in our view is likely to be more disruptive than the emergence of China over the last few decades. And we also know that the world is a less settled place. You know, the portfolio areas of defence, diplomacy and development assistance, they have some pretty clear one-way risk in terms of how much money they're likely to be needed to sustain. I don't want to get too pessimistic about the budget. As I say, it does have some good aspects, and the political realities are what they are, and budgets are framed by politics as much as economics. This is a government with a one-seat majority in the House of Reps, and it's essentially forced to deal with a rainbow of parties in the Senate over each and every piece of legislation. Against that backdrop, it's really hard to have a strong reformist expectation, and really the hurdle for the budget is that it does no harm. This budget meets that test.